Join us for our how to paint Stormtrooper tutorial.
Spiky bits.
Welcome back, Hobby Maniacs. I'm Baer, and today we're going to show you 7 easy tips to paint up your very own Stormtroopers out of the new Smash FFG Legion game. Well, we think it's going to be a Smash. I'm just assuming it's going to be a Smash, but hey, it is Star Wars. X-Wing did well, right? So we're going to put these on the paint table and take a closer look. Each box of these are going to give you 7 figures, so once you get them all out and put together, which is very easy to do, I recommend dry fitting them and using an X-Acto blade in a safe manner to scrape off all the mold lines. But make sure you dry fit everything, but they push fit together pretty easily. Scrape down your mold lines and everything with an X-Acto. And then I recommend gluing it down to a separate base, which you may have extras of. You can contact some folks at your local game store so that we can paint the base's desert separate. Now, if you have to paint the base after you paint the figure, we'll give you some ideas on how to do that towards the end of the video. Once we get this glued together, the flash all trimmed off, that's those mold lines, another word for it, we're going to use the Army Painter White, matte white spray to base coat this miniature with our aerosol can. Now, we cut a little bit of footage on how to do it with our Rebel Trooper, and we're going to show that to you right now. Now, for the majority of these tutorials, we are going to use the Army Painter spray primer system. I love the Army Painter paints. These are amazing for doing this kind of work because you can color match all of your colors on here to the primer, so you can go back and quickly fix your mistakes very easily with this stuff. Now, to prime, never do this inside. We are doing this inside. I have a little bit of a vent and I'm going to hold my breath, well, as much as I can. However, you should always do this outside in a well-ventilated area. But let me give you some tips on exactly how to primer, because sometimes people don't understand and then they just hose down their middies. And I know a lot of folks out there are just jumping into this, so this should give you a good idea. Now, if you already know how to prime minis, hey, jump to the meat of the tutorial. But for some folks out there, again, we're going to have a lot more beginners. First of all, I just grabbed a little bit of cardboard, but you can use postal service boxes, anything that you might be getting your orders in, or anything that you have laying around the house that is, disposable or recyclable. I'm just going to put my hand underneath the cardboard itself. Some folks like to do it different ways, but I find this gets us the best coverage. So what I'm going to do here is actually spray in a very short controlled burst. So what I'm doing is actually going to push down with my finger as I go while going in a horizontal direction against the miniature. So just like this. And you can see it's definitely putting up some mist into the air there. The key to this is we're just going to keep going with it at a distance of about 9 inches away from the miniature, or I guess that's about between 20 and 25 centimeters in the metric system, depending between 9 and 10 inches. And we're just going to rotate the board as we go. A little bit smaller than I'm used to, but it should still work. So we just kind of did that. We're rotating at 360 with our hand. Then we're going to give it about 5 minutes to dry and come back and do the other side. Now that that is pretty much dry after about 5 minutes or so, we're going to grab our can of Fur Brown, shake it up. I like to shake it left and right and also rotate it around so that the little ball in there is both getting everything at the bottom and getting everything towards the top as well. So good shaking is a key to keeping your primer ready to roll. Then we're going to flip it over on its back because, like I said, this should be dry already. Now, you might not have to wait 5 minutes or so, because if you have like 10 models and then you're going to pick up and prime another model, another 10 models like you're doing the starter, and just go in assembly line fashion, by the time you get back around to these, they would have already been dry. Then you can flip them, grab your primer. Another good thing to do is write the primer name underneath it. It is printed, but just in case that gets rubbed off, so that way you're not priming your Rebel Troopers white and your Stormtroopers brown or something like that. And then we're just going to do the same exact thing. We're going to hit it from this angle, very slowly moving our board. Again, you can place it on something, but watch for overspray. I just like to use my hand. I've been doing it this way. And we're going to give it another 5 minutes to dry and come back and hit it from the top down. And now that that's dry, the very last step after shaking our can up is to put our model straight up and down, perpendicular. Take a look to see if there's any undercuts. I'm actually looking straight forward at the miniature from the side perspective, it's not the top down that you're seeing. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to spray in this direction just to get a little bit of underneath, but also from the top down, which might not be an angle that we got already. And what this is going to do, this is going to give you the full 360 coverage of primer on your miniature. And put another 5 minutes on the clock and we'll be right back. Now this step probably doesn't take that long because you're not using as much primer, but like I said, if you did it right, you're probably getting a nice solid 360 coverage of the primer. Now here's why using the Army Painter color match system is so clutch, because they sell bottles of all of their primer. Here's the Flora Brown, 100% guaranteed match. We're just gonna put a little on our palette already, grab some of this. We're just gonna get in here and get like the underneath of this coat right where we missed some. So it's not worth squirting a bunch of primer up in there just to get gobs and everything over on everything else. So sometimes you do have to go in your nooks and crannies very, very remotely, sometimes in these overhangs, and just get in there and nug it out and get your base coat done. I'm not gonna worry about the gun because the gun is gonna be black, but there you can see 100% color match from the primer to the paint itself, which is wonderful. It's almost like hobby magic. I love Army Painter stuff, and I'm really glad that we have it to show you guys on this desert paint scheme of this man right here. So there you go. There is how to prime your miniature. So step one, assemble and prime your miniature is complete. Now it's time to do some base coating. Here's a quick pro tip before we get started. Some of these Army Painter paints, actually all of them for the most part, especially the ones that come in sets, they're going to pack with a little bit of extra matte medium in here. And what that means is that there's going to be liquid in here to help keep the paints from drying out themselves, which is an amazing idea, and kudos to Army Painter for doing it. However, what you need to know is that when you open a fresh pot of this stuff, do not shake it at first. What you need to do first is get in here and start squeezing it out. And you can see there that it's not paint that's coming out, right? It's going to leak what looks to be not paint for a hot minute. Once you get down to the actual paint itself, which just started coming out right there, you're good to go. And just dab off your paint, and now everything in here is straight paint, and you can shake this up and actually use it for your project. After you spray primer your Stormtrooper with matte white, you should get something that looks pretty much like this here for the most part. You can take the matte white color match paint from Army Painter and go back in and hit any areas that you might have missed, that you might still see some of that gray plastic up underneath or anything like that. And now we're going to switch and we're going to start step two, actually laying down the base coats. And there's not a whole lot of base coats to do with the Stormtrooper. It's pretty much white and black. But unfortunately, that is the most infuriating color out there to paint together, because one is light and one is dark. And if you mess up, you have to take the white and go back over the black, which fortunately for us, the Army Painter matte white goes over the black for the most part pretty decently. But that doesn't mean we can be sloppy. We want to be as neat as we can with this matte black right here, which means we need to be on our detail brush game. Every stroke of the brush needs to be very, very precise as best as you can. So use your fingers to support yourself as you're trying to paint this miniature, and pull every paint stroke towards you as best you can, forming a nice tip on the end of the brush with by twisting it on the paint palette that you're putting the paint on, or with your your tongue itself. We call those people affectionately brush lickers. Nothing wrong with it. You can see here, getting in some of these Under Armour webbings is going to be very difficult without getting black. Of course, it's even more difficult trying to film it at a weird angle for myself to show you guys. But you're just going to have to go in and do the work here and just kind of listen to an audiobook, which I recommend, or just putting your mind somewhere else and just getting in here and being one with the Stormtrooper. Now, I had to check some reference material to kind of see what all should be black. This square down here is black, believe it or not, in here. So pull up some pictures of Stormtroopers on the internet and you'll get a better idea of where to paint the black areas. Back here, you're gonna see some of this underneath to paint black where you won't see it on this side. Well, maybe there's a little bit right there. It's very hard to see from this angle. Some of the cases, the backs of the knees will get painted black where the fronts won't, but then there'll be areas in the front that you would paint black with a very, very thin line, and the back of the knee joint wouldn't be painted. So it can be infuriating at times. Just go through, paint the whole line, come back, check your work. You'll find some things that were wrong. That's fine. You can correct them with black, and then we'll move on to the next part of the base coating, which is covering up with white. With any luck, you have ended up with something like this. For the most part, all the black parts picked out here, all the webbing and underneath detail and everything looking good. Now, hey, even I have made mistakes, and supposedly I'm an expert, air quotes, but yeah, this is one of those things. It's a mental thing. So now we're going to clean it up. And fortunately, like I said, Army Painter's matte white is an excellent choice to go back and fix all this. Not only because it color matches the white that we used for the primer, which helps out immensely, but also because it's a little bit thicker. It's almost like a artist acrylic, I want to say. I'm not exactly sure. I'm just spitballing here, but it is very thick. So we're just going to start, just so you can see this, the red on the tops of the fingers right here where we kind of overlapped with a little bit of the black. We're just going to go back and clean that up. And a neat trick to show you guys is some of the areas here that, like around the edges of any armor plates, you can see right there that spot that I got a little too much black around the corner right there. You can just come in at a perpendicular angle, or maybe like a 45-degree angle in some cases, and just hit that. And what it's going to do is, well, you might still have to go in right here as well and touch that up. But what it's going to do is it's going to fix it without you having to be incredibly precise. And the more precise you try to be, the more chances are you're going to mess up. But if you just use it to edge the miniature, in a lot of cases, or the cleanup, you can fix that too. Like these areas back here, right around the inside shoulder plates. Just going in here with the right amount of paint on my brush and get a little bit more off there just to show you guys. And now it's going to be a little bit less on the paint because I took a little bit off to get more precise. So I need to put a little bit more paint back on there to cover it all up. But with a little bit of luck, you'll get the idea here, and just keep going back and trying to clean up as much as you can. And another thing to keep in mind too is, in a lot of cases with the black, even if you get a little bit of black on the white, as long as you edge it with some crisp edges, you might not even be able to tell that the part that you got the black on was supposed to be white in the first place. If there's a little bit of overlap up onto an armor plate, as long as you follow and you keep a nice straight line around it, you might be able to get away with it and not have to go back and clean it up with a little bit of white. So now that that's done, I'm gonna go in there, get all in the nitty gritty, and block out all the areas that need to be touched up. And once you get done with those touch-ups, take a break, because you've earned it. White on black and touching it up is some of the most frustrating colors and things you can do in painting out there today. So take a break, come back, and then we are going to start on the guns. So here we are. Not many colors left, only one on this guy. Now on some of the troopers, there will be backpacks and things that you can use. Necromancer Cloak is a great gray to use on that, or Uniform Gray from Army Painter. Both of those are pretty good for that. And then you can just use, if you saw the Rebel Trooper tutorial, the fur color in that makes a great color for the shoulder pad for the sergeant as well. But other than that, the only other color that you're going to need is gunmetal from Army Painter as well for the metallic. Get a little on your palette, twist it onto your brush, and we're going to get in here and lightly highlight these raised edges all over this blaster here. And there are a few upgrade troopers in this set, so you're just going to do the same thing, but the guns are obviously a little bit bigger, but you want to leave a little bit of the black underneath showing. to create that contrast for our next step, step 3. Well, after we gloss coat this, we're going to wash it, and what that's going to do is get down in the recesses. But before all that, we have to set it all up with this base coat right here. So go through, do all that. Try not to get anything on that fresh white and black you just fixed. And now our base coats are complete with the gun all detailed out on all the black and all the white. And now we have a bit of a decision to make. On one hand, we can varnish this with a satin varnish, which gives it a little bit of a sheen because, you know, Stormtrooper armor is a bit shiny. And then we can just work on the base and be done with it and not do any additional highlights or detail work. Or, on the other hand, we can hit it with Model Master gloss varnish, then give it a wash, then highlight it, and work on the base. We're going to go the extra mile here, but it's perfectly okay to stop and skip ahead to the part to do the desert base. So after applying one coat of gloss coat here, using the same techniques for priming your miniature, we are going to get busy with some dark tone wash here. Now there are some products still on the market that says ink right here. You don't want the one that says ink, you want the one that says wash, but for the most part everyone you'll find will say wash on it. And you're going to want a chisel brush here, and when you have all that, put a little bit of the dark tone out on your palette, soak your bristles of your wedge brush all up in that, and get it nice and sopping wet with all that. And we're starting at the top of the miniature and pulling the wash down over all of it here and letting gravity do its trick, starting at the top. And we've got a little bit of time because of the gloss coat and the way they make this wash right here. We should have enough time, assuming we poured out enough of our dark tone here to get all over the miniature. Just kind of help it on its way to coat the whole thing. So you're going to want to give it a nice solid coat over everything, even the gun. Doesn't matter that it's silver. This is going to help accent it and pull out those details. So it looks a little streaky right now, but the way they make this material and the way we gloss coated this, it will spread out and get into all of the cracks and start to kind of fill in all those gaps right there. But we are going to come back before it dries, and you're going to want to hit any areas with a freshly cleaned brush with a little bit of water on it to scoop up all that moisture, those glip glops, those Klingons. You don't want any of that getting over your miniature. So I'm going to stop recording now and tend to the Stormtrooper. So this is the part of the tutorial where something happens that I didn't plan for. The dark tone is a little too dark for, even though we used the gloss coat, for this all white armor. Unlike the Rebel tutorial where it settled in just fine, as you can see here, it is, while it did settle in and it got in all the cracks, and it's a great contrast. And maybe you just want to stop here and matte coat it down from here and be like, hey, Stormtrooper's dirty, no big deal, he's in the desert. I've seen this before, it was episode 4. But what we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to grab that matte white that we used to touch up, to color match and touch up all those black under webbings and stuff like that. And we're going to actually go in and layer brush, like you can see I already did on the back right here. And this is going to make some really awesome, very stark contrast work over the whole model. Now it's a lot more work than what I was willing to do, but here's how we solve that problem going forward on the rest of our Stormtroopers for the starter. What we're going to do is we're going to take and add quick shade washing medium to the dark tone, and what this is going to do is it's going to thin it out. So in a separate little palette, which what we should have done is put a little bit in here and then add about equal or slightly more parts of the mixing medium and mix this together till it looks like chocolate milk. let's see, get it all mixed together. And it should look about like chocolate milk. Now, if we had done that, it would have been a lot lighter and a lot easier to either just live with the way it was, or to go back and touch up those areas with a little bit of white on top. Now, here's the Stormtrooper I did as a test figure, and that's exactly what I did with this one. And this is without any touch-ups of white. So this is just straight using that same technique I just outlined below with no touch-ups of white whatsoever. So it is a little bit of a time saver, but that's okay. We're definitely gonna fix this guy and make him right for the rest of the tutorial. So a few short minutes later, we've blocked in all of the white on this miniature and got a really nice looking model after all, with nice contrast and a little bit, we went a little thin on the white, so it's a little bit dirty, definitely like he's been combing the desert for days looking for some rebels right there. So I'm really stoked for this. So the only thing that's left to do with this miniature is to base and seal it the same way we did for our Rebel Trooper. So the first step to basing your miniatures is a nifty product called Vallejo Coarse Pumice. It comes in this can. It runs about 10 bucks, but they have smaller versions of it that you can buy, or conversely, you can just use playground sand and some PVA glue, which is a fancy way of saying Elmer's glue out there. It's just the white Elmer's glue from school. I like this stuff because you have firing arcs on some of the bigger templates, so I use this. All it is just kind of like a paste, and with a ladle-like device, you're gonna put this onto the bases, and then using that same technique we used to prime our miniature, you're going to prime your base desert yellow from Army Painter after the texture itself dries. There you can see a profile view of all the texture after it dries. It takes, you know, about an hour or so. So do all your bases at once if this is the way you want to do it. And like I said, for the firing arc ones, after it starts to dry, you can just go in with the same tool and notch out where all the firing arcs are with that same tool, because they're actually into the base itself. So easy game, easy life when it comes to that. So once you have your base all primed up and dry, it's time for the next step. Now we're going to use a technique called dry brushing, which is fantastic. And if you're new to the painting world, well, you're going to use this a lot more. So the first step to dry brushing is to get you a big poofy brush. Here you can see I've already been dry brushing a lot of bases, so this is just going to make this a lot easier. Normally you don't want to see any paint on your brush, and you know, proper brush care stuff you can research somewhere else. We're not going to get into it on this tutorial, but we're going to take some matte white first off, put a little on our palette, and then get some on our brush. Here you can see that we have indeed plenty of paint on our brush. Then we're going to grab a paper towel that we've used for all of these tutorials already and brush some of the paint off. And there you can see where the fur color is starting to get covered up by white. And what's that doing is it's pulling the paint off of the bristles here, right? And only keeping paint on some of the interior bristles. So we're basically dry brushing the detail of this paper towel right now with our dry brush. It's a little bit hard to see when you use paper towels and you're working with white, but any other color will be a lot easier to see. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, in singular direction, move this dry brush over this desert yellow base to make it look like it has just started snowing on the desert. Very lightly going in one direction here, not the band, the direction. And you can see as we press down gently, those inside bristles are really starting, the paint is starting to transfer off and go onto the base itself. And now instead of a yellowy base, we have the upper edges of the desert yellow are now white. So we've created a layer of highlight with very little work, because we're not going to get in there with a detail brush and be like, this edge and this edge and this edge and this grain of sand and this grain of sand. That's just silly. Next, we're going to use Desert Yellow itself in the dropper bottle. Remember, this is all color match from the primer, so theoretically, this will exact. So if you mess up, you can just, instead of reprimering your models, this is a little watery, but this should exactly match the base itself when it's drying. You can see it's already started to dry and exactly match. The beauty of Army Painter comes through once again. So now we've got a little bit on our palette over here. We're going to dip our brush in it just like we just showed you, and then take our paper towel, and after getting the majority of the paint off of it, we're going to repeat the same process going in the same direction across the base. Remember to not go back and forth. You don't want to go like this. You're not painting a fence. You're just painting in one direction. And this is going to build up a consecutive highlight level to the desert that's starting to create texture instead of one just big color right there. And the third step to basing is to grab your white again, to get in that sweet burned out sandy desert or white sands, that Tatooine plains, is to get some white again, get it off your brush, and very gently again go in one direction with your brush, and now you have a beautiful looking desert sand base right there. Check that out. That is awesome. Now the only thing that's left is to glue your miniature back to this base, or to clean up any of the paint that you may have gotten on your miniature, because if you kept your miniature glued to this, you can paint desert yellow all around the base itself if you want, but the best idea is to paint these separate. The easiest way I found to reattach a figure to the base after you finished it is it requires a little bit of coordination. So you're going to grab your X-Acto knife of whatever brand you might have, and on top of a cutting mat, you're going to want to slice down in a perpendicular motion the feet off the base. Hopefully you didn't use that much glue, but sometimes it's difficult. And with a thorough flush motion against the base there, you're going to push through to the figure and rotating it as needed. I'm right-handed, so I feel like this is a good way to go right here. Again, lining it up perfect so you can make one solid motion pushing against the base. And there it has come off successfully without slicing through the foot. Now we're going to grab a little bit of hobby glue and attach the miniature to the base, just like we attached all the arms and everything onto this. And after you get your miniature attached to the base, paint the lip with leather brown paint, one of my faves as well. We use that on the Stormtroopers quite a bit. Go around the whole base with several thin coats. With a little bit of luck, it'll only take you 2 for that coverage there. And now it's time to seal your miniature using the Army Painter Anti-Shine Matte Varnish. So any of that wash that might still be exposed, it's a little shiny, it'll take the edge off it and protect your miniature. It's very important to do this because you're going to be chipping up your bases and such when you use the movement template, well, at least for the Sergeant. But sometimes when they bump up against the barricades and stuff, you want to make sure they are resilient. So read the warnings on this. Make sure you don't use it in high humidity so you don't mess up your miniatures. There's plenty of tutorials on how to seal coat your miniatures that you can check out independently, but that's the next step. And the very last part of basing and sealing your miniatures is to add just a couple pieces of Army Painter's Highland Tough. These are the traditional static grass all kind of combined into some convenient little bushes. What I like to do is with tweezers, I grab my selected victim, or my tuft rather, and off camera I have a little bit of Elmer's glue or PVA glue that I just dip it into, and just tweezer it to the base right there. One more for good measure. I feel like we'll get a bigger, bushier one right here. Sometimes they stick together. You may have to use an X-Acto knife to kind of cut them apart if they stick. But for the most part, they are very, very easy going to use. And we'll stick that one right there. And there it is. And the reason that we add the tufts last, being already having paint on them, if you seal your miniature after this point, it's gonna look frosted on the grass there, which is fine if you're doing winter bases, but not in the desert. There's our completed Stormtrooper with the base lipped in leather brown, all of the desert painted up just like our Rebel Trooper, and a couple of tufts of Highland turf added in for good measure. So I think this turned out very well, but don't forget there to always make sure with the lighter colors that you cut down your wash a little bit with the quick shade mixy medium, so you don't have to do that extra work to go back and line it with your white paint. You do want to, but at the end of the day, you don't want to do it as much as we had to with this one to cover up some of the streaking or the coffee staining, as they like to call it. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with this project, and of course the test miniature that I did before this tutorial. So very shortly we will have some how to play and additional unboxings and such for all of the new Legion miniatures. So be sure to check those out. Overall, I hope you really enjoyed our tutorial on how to paint this Stormtrooper. Make sure you subscribe to us and turn on notifications so you can be the very first to like and comment on all the great Legion videos we have coming out.
Deleted scenes, bonus content, and all the interviews and post-game wrap-up videos can be located in the Hall of Veterans on thelongwar.net. Visit thelongwar.net today and try a week completely free with no strings attached. That's not all. Thelongwar.net is also your hobby resource for exclusive early access with an ad-free experience to all your favorite videos. Members of the Hall of Veterans gain early exclusive access to multiple hobby videos.